Hi guys, welcome back. It's Lauren again, and if you haven't seen the first video where I talk about this epic tantrum that my daughter had when she first turned 2, then check that out. The link will be below for you. And today I want to talk about how we can parent without hardening our kids' hearts. And this is something that I know I've talked to a lot of moms, and I've experienced myself where you kind of worry, like, am I being too harsh? Are my kids mad at me? And that's something personally that was difficult for me at first. I don't like when people are disappointed with me or mad at me. So if I set a boundary with my kids and they pushed back and were like, I don't like you or whatever, I would take it personally and felt bad. So I was like, how can I do this? How can I make sure I'm still setting those boundaries, because they're so important, without really getting my kids to harden their hearts? I still want to build that relationship with them. So I don't know if you've ever heard this about marriages, but I heard this analogy and I think it's great for parents and kids too. And the analogy is that our relationship is like a bank account, and you have to make deposits, and you make deposits and kind of fill up that account or that tank. And there will be times where you have to withdraw money, where you have to withdraw. So you're kind of lowering that tank of love or that relationship. And so it's important to have both, right? Because there are going to be times where we do have to say no, or we have to set a boundary or disappoint our kids. And then it's important that we still have those moments where we still connected and found this relationship or bond. So when I went back, I told you in the last video, I looked at all this research because I wanted to know what worked and what was the best thing out there. I found 2 things that were really important to make those deposits with your kids and to build that relationship. First is we try to have a monthly date night or some one-on-one time with our kids. And, it doesn't have to be a big deal. I know you're like, oh, one more thing to add to my to-do list, but we just maybe go to Starbucks and get a treat and talk, or go to Barnes & Noble and look at some books together. We just try to have one-on-one time with our kids. If my husband goes out with our daughter, then I'll take my son out, and they love it. It's just something they really look forward to. The other thing that has a lot of research about it is dinner time. And this was something that was so chaotic in my family. I don't know if your kids are like this, but mine are constantly asking for snacks. And so by 4:30, 5, definitely they are hungry. And it was hard for them to wait for my husband to come home from work. And so I was like, okay, here, just quick eat. Then maybe I would eat, then my husband would eat. But it was just so not connected. There was no unity. I felt like it was a chaotic time. We often were getting mad at each other. So after reading that this dinner time together, and this was with middle schoolers or 5th, 6th graders, it actually protected against anxiety, depression. Kids who had dinner with their parents had better school grades and performance. So I was like, okay, this is big. Can make a big impact and really affect them. And I'm sure those families who were eating together at 5th and 6th grade were doing so also when they were younger. They didn't just start the routine. So I was like, we need a better routine. And so now we sit down all together, and unless for some reason, my husband has a really late work meeting, I'm not going to say we do this 100% of the time, but 80 to 90% of the time, we all sit down together and we ask our kids what their favorite part of the day was, and it's something they really look forward to. And if we forget to ask, they're like, Mommy, what was your favorite part of the day? And it's just a great time. We put away all the cell phones where we can connect and make those deposits, right? And build that relationship, because we're so busy. We need time set aside to just focus on each other and talk to each other. And now the time for when you will have to take out some money from the love tank, right? There are going to be times where we have to set a boundary or we have to disappoint our kids. And there are 2 kind of secrets, things you can do to help in those moments. First is to be consistent. Now, this seems kind of obvious. You're like, yeah, I know that. But when we really take a step back and look, even in my own life, I know that sometimes I'm not always consistent. And my son may ask for a snack at 4:30, and one day I'm just like, tired, feeling overwhelmed, and I'm just like, here, take it. I don't want to hear you bug me anymore. Well, then the next day he's going to ask again. If I say no because I'm feeling stronger that day, then he's going to be confused and it's just going to be kind of chaotic. So we need to be consistent, and then our kids start to learn that like mommy means what she says, and they don't take it as personally because they know that's like a rule or a boundary in their house. And then the second really big one is to take emotion out of it. And this can be really hard to do, especially like if you had a really long day and you just feel like your kids are pushing on every last nerve. You might just scream like, stop it, stop, just stop doing that. Without that smile, right? But they will hear your anger and they will hear your tone of voice and your body language. And instead of focusing on what they're doing wrong, they will just focus on your frustration or anger. And I'm going to be honest, I've asked my kids before, I'm like, we're reading a book and talking about maybe getting angry. And I'm like, well, what's made you angry before? And both my kids have said, when you yell at me. And so I'm like, I didn't even yell at you. I was just telling you that, like you couldn't do this. But again, they were focusing on my anger or frustration and not their own issue or with their own behavior. So we really need to try to keep a calm voice and to compose ourselves and be like, this is not appropriate. We don't do this in our house. And that will go over a lot better than if we're screaming at them and just yelling at them to stop. They're mostly going to just agitate the situation. So you may be thinking, but how do I do that? How do I stay calm? Especially with all these pressures and, things like our to-do lists are more and longer than ever before. How do we stay calm as parents? And so come back tomorrow. I will share ways that I found that work to stay calm and to not lose it on my kids. But I want to hear from you right now. I want to know, how do you find quality time with your kids? Do you guys have like certain dinner time routines that you love or that someone else shared with you that's really made a big impact? Hit the reply button or comment below and let me know your favorite ways to connect and build that relationship with your kids.